When you hear Journey's Lights, it feels like a warm embrace. The guitars sparkle, the rhythm sways gently, and Steve Perry's voice rises and falls like a tide. For many, it became a postcard of San Francisco, a love song to the bay, to the city, to the way the water glows when the night comes. But what if I told you that this song, one of the band's most cherished, didn't begin as a celebration? Behind the curtain, there was no golden glow. Instead, there was a young man, 28 years old, sitting in a small room at night, staring out a window, wondering if he had made the biggest mistake of his life. That man was Steve Perry, and the song wasn't born from joy, it was born from loneliness. You see, when Perry first joined Journey, he wasn't welcomed as a savior. He was an outsider. The other members already had years of history together, and now here came this newcomer, with his soaring voice and different vision for the band. The crowd might have seen destiny, but Steve Perry only felt distance. He was far from home, far from family, far from anyone who really knew him. The lights of San Francisco weren't just beautiful, they were cold reminders of how alone he really was. So while the world hears lights and thinks of love and belonging, Perry himself admitted years later that it was also about homesickness, about the ache of sitting in silence while the city sparkled without him. And the deeper truth? That feeling never really left him. So how does a song written out of heartbreak end up sounding like a hymn of hope? And why did Perry choose to hide the real story for so long? The answers are waiting in the shadows of those lonely nights. This is RetroWaves, the channel where music legends are more than just names, and the songs you thought you knew hold secrets that can still surprise you. If you've ever listened to a classic track and felt there was something deeper, something unspoken beneath the melody, then you're in the right place. Hit subscribe, tap the bell, and join us on this journey. Because here we uncover the stories that shape the music and the people who lived through them. And today, we're going to walk with Steve Perry through those quiet nights, those lonely hours, and discover how Lights became more than just a song about a city. It became the song that saved him. To understand Lights, you have to understand where Steve Perry was in his life when it was written. The year was 1977. Journey had been together for several years already, grinding on the road, releasing albums that critics praised but the public didn't fully embrace. The band was known for their technical skill. They had roots in jazz fusion and progressive rock, but they lacked a mainstream voice that could bring their songs to radio audiences. Columbia Records knew it, the band knew it. Something had to change. That's when Steve Perry's demo tape landed in the hands of Herbie Herbert, Journey's manager. The moment Herbert heard Perry's voice, he knew it was lightning in a bottle. Perry didn't just sing, he soared. His tone had warmth, ache, and power all at once. He was the missing piece. But for Perry, stepping into Journey wasn't the triumphant dream it might sound like. He had spent years in obscurity. He'd sung with smaller bands, worked odd jobs, and chased chance after chance that slipped away. Just before Journey, he had even considered giving up on music altogether. One more rejection, one more closed door, and he might have gone home for good. Instead, he got the call that would change his life. But joining Journey didn't erase the years of struggle. It didn't silence the doubt inside him. If anything, it amplified it, because now he was surrounded by a group of musicians who had built something without him. They had their inside jokes, their shared memories, their way of doing things. Perry walked into that world as the new guy, the one with everything to prove. And though the audience would eventually embrace him, behind the scenes he was just a man in a strange city, far from home, with nobody to confide in. He'd look out over San Francisco Bay at night, watching the lights shimmer, and wonder, would he ever feel like he belonged? Those moments of longing began to take shape in melody. They spilled out in words that seemed simple on the surface, but held the weight of everything he was carrying inside. Lights in the city, shine on the bay. A love song? Yes, but also a cry for connection. And as Perry worked on the song, he may not have realized it then, but he was writing the very piece that would define his relationship with Journey, with the city, and with the millions of fans who would one day sing along. But before it became that, it was simply the song of a lonely man. And the question he faced every night was this: could music be enough to fill the silence? Steve Perry wasn't supposed to be the frontman of Journey. In fact, when he first arrived, the band wasn't sure they wanted him at all. Journey had started as a musician's band, heavy on instrumental solos, light on pop sensibility. Perry's soaring tenor, dripping with soul and vulnerability, was the opposite of what they had built their reputation on. The band worried, would this change everything they stood for? But Columbia Records insisted. They needed a singer who could bring them hits. Perry was that singer. So, in late 1977, Perry stepped onto the stage with Journey for the first time. Fans were shocked. This wasn't the raw, jazzy group they remembered. This was something new. Some cheered, others were skeptical, and inside, Perry could feel that skepticism too. Yes, his voice was stunning. Yes, he had the gift. But talent doesn't erase loneliness. Every night after rehearsals, when the laughter and conversation faded, Perry would retreat alone. The others had each other. He had himself. And this is where Lights was born. Not from a place of triumph, but from quiet, aching solitude. Perry would later admit the song reflected not only the beauty of San Francisco, but also the longing he felt for home, for comfort, for familiarity, for belonging. Lights in the city, he sang, shine on the bay. To the world, it sounded like a postcard. To Perry, it was a reminder that while the city glowed, he was still on the outside looking in. And the deeper question lingered: how long could he survive like this before the silence swallowed him? San Francisco, with its rolling fog and glittering skyline, should have been the perfect inspiration for a rising star. But for Perry, it was a city that reminded him of everything he didn't have. The band rehearsed endlessly. The pressure was high, and though the chemistry on stage grew stronger, off-stage Perry often walked alone. He wasn't yet part of the family. He wasn't yet one of the guys. In interviews, years later, Perry explained that Lights was about more than just a city. It was about his deep sense of homesickness. He missed his mother. He missed the small-town roots he'd grown up with. He missed belonging to something familiar. Rumor has it, and again this is only speculation, never confirmed, that Perry would sometimes take long walks at night, wandering the waterfront, just to clear his head. The truth we know for certain is that he used those lonely nights to write, to capture the ache inside him before it consumed him. And when he wrote, the words came not as a complaint, but as a plea. When the lights go down in the city and the sun shines on the bay, it wasn't just scenery, it was him trying to convince himself that even if he felt alone, maybe, just maybe, the city could still offer him light. But here's the twist. Though Perry was writing from loneliness, the melody he built around those words didn't sound sad. It sounded beautiful, hopeful, almost like he was disguising his pain behind a gift he was offering the world. And that gift would soon become Journey's turning point. But before the world embraced the song, Perry had to face one last question. Would the band? What's shocking is that Lights almost never became the anthem we know today. When Perry first introduced the song, Journey wasn't sure what to make of it. They were still wrestling with their identity. Were they going to stay a musician's band, focused on complex arrangements, or embrace the soulful, emotional direction Perry brought with him? Perry sat at the piano and began to sing. His voice filled the room. The words were simple, the melody glowed. But behind it all was his truth, the loneliness that shaped every note. At first, some in the band weren't convinced. Neil Sean, the guitarist who would become Perry's closest creative partner, was supportive, but others worried that songs like Lights would soften the band's edge. It was a crossroads moment. Would they risk everything they had built to follow this new singer's vision? Or would they play it safe and stay the band they had always been, respected, but struggling to break through? In the end, Perry's voice won. There was no denying it. Lights became part of their next chapter, recorded for the 1978 album Infinity. The song was never a massive hit on the charts. In fact, It only reached modest positions when it was released. But what numbers didn't show was the way people felt when they heard it. Fans in San Francisco especially embraced it instantly. It became their song. A soundtrack to the Bay, a hymn to home. And for Perry, that was enough. Because even if the charts didn't shout its success, the connection it created meant he wasn't singing into silence anymore. Still, the truth remained. Lights wasn't just a love song to the city. It was Perry's way of surviving those first painful nights in Journey. But years later, when he finally admitted the loneliness behind it, fans began to ask, was Lights the beginning of his rise, or the first sign of the struggles that would haunt him forever? When Lights finally made its way into the world in 1978, something unexpected happened. Even though it wasn't a smash hit on the national charts, the city of San Francisco embraced it like an anthem. Radio stations in the Bay Area played it constantly. Fans began to treat it as if it had been written just for them, a song that captured the glow of their home. It became tied to the city's identity, its baseball team, even its spirit. For Steve Perry, this reaction was overwhelming. The very city that had once made him feel so alone now seemed to sing his words back to him. Every time the chorus echoed, "When the lights go down in the city," the loneliness that had driven him to write it felt just a little less sharp. And yet, there was irony here. Because while the public thought it was a love song to San Francisco, Perry knew it was born from homesickness, from those nights when he didn't feel like part of anything. Still, he didn't correct them. He let the song take on its own meaning. He let San Francisco have it. Because maybe, deep down, that's what he wanted all along, to belong. To be claimed by a city that had once felt so foreign. The song became a bridge. Perry wasn't alone anymore. The crowd had taken him in. But the question lingered. Could the bond last? Or was this connection only skin deep? The success of Lights marked the beginning of Journey's transformation. With Steve Perry at the helm, their sound shifted from a musician's showcase into something far more emotional, melodic, and radio-friendly. The gamble worked. The album Infinity became their breakthrough, and Perry's arrival was the reason. Fans flocked to his voice. Critics who once dismissed Journey now praised them for finding their identity. But inside the band, not everything was smooth. Change always comes with tension. Some members worried they were abandoning their roots, and Perry, though now the face of Journey, still carried the weight of being the outsider. Imagine the pressure to not only join an established band, but to completely redirect its sound and future. Perry was still young, still haunted by self-doubt. And while the cheers from the audience were loud, the quiet of hotel rooms and empty nights on the road were louder. This is something many fans don't realize. Lights was only the beginning of Perry's struggle. The loneliness that inspired it never fully left. If anything, as Journey rose higher, so did the cost. Because success brought crowds, but it also built walls. The more famous he became, the harder it was to know who truly cared for him, and who just wanted the glow of his star. And so, even as Lights lifted Journey into a new era, Perry's heart was still asking the same question: would he ever feel truly at home? For years, fans believed Lights was nothing more than a simple ode to San Francisco. They sang it at concerts, they swayed to its melody, and it became a symbol of the Bay itself. But then, years later, Steve Perry let something slip. He admitted that the song wasn't only about the city, it was about the nights of loneliness when he first joined Journey. It was about feeling far away from everything he knew. The confession changed the way people heard the song. Suddenly, those glowing lyrics carried a shadow. They weren't just about beauty, they were about longing. And here's where the story takes a twist. Perry didn't reveal this meaning in the early years. He kept it private. Maybe he didn't want to ruin the joy fans found in it. Maybe he wasn't ready to admit how lost he had felt. Rumor suggests that Perry often downplayed his struggles in interviews. Afraid of showing weakness. Again, that's speculation, not confirmed. What we do know is that when he finally spoke openly about the song's origin, it revealed just how much of himself he had hidden behind the music. Because Lights wasn't just a song to fill an album, it was his way of coping, his way of surviving. And when he admitted its true meaning, fans could suddenly see the man behind the voice. Not just a rock star but a human being who once sat in silence, aching for connection. It's easy to hear a song and think it's simple, but behind Lights was a story of belonging, of pain, and of one man's desperate need to hold on to hope. And the truth is, that need never fully left him. Even though Lights never topped the charts, it refused to fade away. Year after year, the song grew bigger, passed hand to hand, city to city, until it became one of Journey's most enduring tracks. In San Francisco, it became tradition. The Giants baseball team played it at games, radio stations called it one of the city's unofficial anthems. Decades later, you can still hear it echoing across the Bay as thousands of fans sing along. But while the public made it their own, Perry lived with a different reality. Every time he sang Lights, he was taken back to those nights of loneliness. For him, the song wasn't just a crowd pleaser, it was a reminder of the ache that had shaped him. This dual meaning, joy for the fans, pain for the singer, made the song almost bittersweet. Perry would smile on stage, his voice soaring, but inside, he knew the truth. He had written those words to survive his darkest nights. And yet maybe that's why it connected so deeply. Because even though the fans didn't know the full story, they could feel something in it, something real, something on it. That's the power of music. It can turn one man's loneliness into another person's comfort. But the deeper question remains. If Lights was Perry's way of coping, what happened when the loneliness kept following him, even at the height of fame? Success gave Steve Perry everything he thought he wanted. Fame, money, the adoration of millions. And yet, it also came with the very thing he had feared most, isolation. As Journey grew into one of the biggest bands in the world, the demands only increased. Tours stretched longer, the pressure to keep delivering hits mounted higher. Perry became the face of the band, the voice that defined them, but also the man who carried the heaviest weight. In interviews later in his life, Perry admitted that loneliness was a theme that never really left him. Even at the peak of his career, he often felt alone. Even surrounded by crowds, the quiet afterward was crushing. And so, Lights became more than just the song that introduced him to the world. It became a reflection of his life. A reminder that no matter how much success he found, the hunger for connection, for true belonging, was always there. Rumors have circled for years, whispers that Perry's distance from the band later on came from this very struggle. Again, that's speculation, never confirmed. What we know for certain is that Perry eventually stepped away, leaving behind not just the spotlight, but also the very stage that had once given him purpose. And yet, through all of it, Lights remained. The song that had started in a lonely room at 28 still lives on, sung in stadiums, played on radios, carried in the voices of fans who never stopped believing. But the real climax of this story comes when we ask, what was Steve Perry really telling us through this song all along? The peak of this story doesn't come from a chart number, a tour, or a stadium full of fans. It comes from the moment Perry admitted the truth. Lights wasn't just about San Francisco. It wasn't just a pretty melody. It was about the nights he sat in silence, wondering if he would ever belong. Imagine the vulnerability in that, to stand on stage, night after night, and sing words the crowd thought were joyous, while inside you knew they were born from your deepest loneliness. That's the contradiction that defines Lights. The world hears hope. Perry felt ache. And here's the twist. Maybe that's exactly why the song resonates so much, because it carries both the joy and the sorrow, the beauty and the pain. The crowd feels uplifted, because Perry buried his wounds in the melody. He gave them his heartbreak, but he wrapped it in a voice so beautiful that it sounded like love. For decades, Perry kept this meaning close to his chest. He let the fans celebrate it as their anthem. But when he finally admitted what the song really meant, it revealed something about him that fans had always suspected. Steve Perry wasn't just a rock star. He was a man searching for belonging just like everyone else. And that's why Lights will never die. because behind its glow is a human truth that doesn't fade. But it also leaves us with one haunting question. If Perry's most hopeful-sounding song came from his loneliest nights, how many other hits we love were born from the same kind of pain? So what do we make of Lights now, decades later? On the surface, it's still the same, a beautiful anthem tied to San Francisco, a fan favorite, a classic in the Journey catalog. But when you know the story, it becomes something deeper. It becomes a song about survival, about turning pain into beauty, about taking nights of silence and transforming them into something the world could hold on to. For Steve Perry, it was a way to cope, a way to push through the loneliness of being the outsider, a way to remind himself that even if he felt far from home, there was still light in the distance. And for fans, it became more than just a track on a record. It became a soundtrack to their own memories, driving across bridges, watching sunsets, saying goodbye, falling in love. They gave the song their own meaning. That's the magic of music. Perry may have written it from pain, but listeners heard it as joy, and in that exchange, maybe he found the belonging he was always searching for, because what's more powerful than thousands of strangers singing your words back to you, turning your loneliness into their unity? In the end, Lights is both a love song to San Francisco and a love song to the need we all have for connection. And maybe that's why Perry kept the truth hidden for so long, because he knew the song wasn't his anymore. It belonged to everyone who ever needed it. And that's the real story of Steve Perry's Lights, a song that sounded like joy but was born from loneliness. What do you hear when you listen now? Do you hear San Francisco's glow, or a man's quiet cry for connection? Let us know in the comments your memories, your thoughts, your own story with this song. This is RetroWaves, where we uncover the truths behind the legends. Subscribe now, because the stories don't stop here. There are still so many songs, so many secrets waiting to be revealed. And maybe the next one will change the way you hear music.